الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, السلام عليكم. This is the fifth session we have on our weekly discussion on ethics and morality in light of the 40 hadiths by Ayatollah Imam Khomeini. Last week we looked at the hadiths where the purpose was two. Number one, to understand that hadith by itself in a way is similar to Quran. In a sense, to understand certain ahadith, you have to look at some other ahadith. Just as the ayat of Quran are of two categories, you have muhkam and mutashabih. Muhkam means the ayat which are very clear, precise and decisive, and mutashabih means the ayat where the words have been used not in literal sense, more in an allegorical, symbolic sense. And to understand mutashabih, the only way is to go to muhkam. Otherwise, a person would be confused. Similarly, when we talk about hadith, we have to realize that the first step is to look at the hadith, the sanad, whether it is authentic or not. Once you have covered that process, then you look at the content. And after that, it's not sufficient to look at one hadith by itself in isolation. You have to look at other hadiths of the similar kind in order to get a complete picture. Let me just summarize. The example we have looked at was hadith number 33 from the book 40 Hadith, where the Imam himself was asked about this statement that إِذَا عَرَفْتَ فَعْمَلْ مَا شِئْتَ. Once you have the ma'rifat of the Imam of the time, then you can do whatever you want. And some people right at that time, during the days of the Imam, took this hadith in a very different context. And so the follow-up question came up that, Imam, do you mean that even if they do zina or they steal or they drink intoxicants, still it's okay? And that's where Imam says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that don't play with our ahadith and put them in the proper context. And that's where the Imam at the end explains that when we said إِذَا عَرَفْتَ فَعْمَلْ مَا شِئْتَ, it means once you have the ma'rifat of the Imam, then do whatever you want from the good deeds, whether it is a small or a big deed, it will be acceptable. Because one of the conditions for the acceptance of good deeds is the ma'rifat and the law of the Ahlul Bayt. And so this was one of the important things. Another was the example of the hadith where it says if somebody has the iman, then nothing will happen to that person. No act will ever harm a mu'min, even if it's, the implication would be that whatever you do, it doesn't matter. And this is where you look at the interpretation given by both Imam Khomeini as well as Allama Majlisi, where we see that Ayatollah Khomeini explained Iman as a spiritual state where even if a person commits the sin, he will sincerely do tawbah. And so that's what it means when it says Iman doesn't harm the doer for whatever they do. Allama Majlisi gave a more elaborate explanation where he says, when this hadith talks about Iman, if you have Iman, then nothing will happen to you. This refers to entering the Jahannam or remaining in the Jahannam forever. Allah Majlisi, looking at our other ahadith, he says, Iman will prevent you from the fire of Jahannam, but his interpretation does not exclude the harm in Barzakh. That the azab in the Barzakh can still be there for a mu'min. And this was actually based on the hadith which we looked at it last week. Let me just summarize this part also. That we looked at the concept of how are our deeds and actions viewed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a difference between human perspective and the divine perspective. Husn fi'li and husn fa'ili. These are the terms invented by Allama Sayyid Murtaza Mutahiri. There are three important conditions for good deeds to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number one, Iman in Allah and Rasul. Number two, Ikhlas and sincerity. And number three, the Vilayat of Ahlul Bayt. And the example we saw in the hadith was the example of Iblis. He believed in Allah, he worshipped only Allah, he was a true muwahhid, but just because he refused to show respect to the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was thrown out, banished, and he became a mal'oon. And so that's what we discussed last week. Let me also go to this hadith, which now brings us to tonight's topic. This is the hadith again where the Imam had mentioned a statement where the Ravi comes and the narrator comes to the Imam and he says, we have heard that you said to the sixth Imam, كل شيعتنا في الجنة على ما كان فيهم. All our Shias would be in paradise in whatever state they would be, whatever they would done, doesn't matter. So Imam said, yes, كلهم والله في الجنة. I swear by Allah that all our Shias would be in paradise. So then this person, came up with a follow-up question, جعلت فداك إن الذنوب كثيرا وكثيرة كبار. Many of the sins are major sins, and there are many of them that even mu'minin do. And that is where Imam says, وَأَمَّا فِي الْقِيَامَةِ فَكُلُّكُمْ في الجنة بشفاعة النبي المطاع وصي النبي. Imam says there that as far as the day of judgment is concerned, if you are linked to us, you will have the intercession and shafa'at from the Nabi or from the successor of the Nabi. But the last statement, and that's the topic for tonight, وَلَكِنِّي وَاللَّهِ أَتَخَوَّفُ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْبَرْزَخِ. But by Allah, I am afraid for you in the time of Barzakh. And since this seems to have created a lot of concern in the minds of the brothers and sisters, I thought maybe let us dwell more on this, and inshallah this will become an opportunity for ourselves to reflect on this important issue and prepare ourselves. Because as the Imam says, on the day of Qiyamah, you can rely on us. But for Barzakh, you have to work yourself. And so let's go and look at this issue, starting with the basics. What is Barzakh? Barzakh literally means a barrier, a gap between two things, or a partition between the two things. And in Quran, Barzakh is used for that time frame between the dunya and the akhirah. So we basically look at our life in three phases. We have the worldly life, and then you have Barzakh, and then you have Qiyamah and later on. And so the middle part between death of a person and the day of resurrection is the time known as Barzakh. So this is a barrier between our life in this dunya and the life in the hereafter. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually has talked about it in one of the ayat of Quran. I didn't write the ayat number there, huh? It is probably in Surah Mu'minun, but I'll give it to you in the handouts. Basically, the ayat is saying, حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَ أَحَدَهُمُ الْمَوْتِ, talking about the day of what will happen to the human beings. Then Allah says, until when death comes to a person. قَالَ let me see here. رَبِّ رَجَعُونِي, O Allah, send me back. It's after the death comes, then a person realizes that he has missed the opportunity to do good. So now he pleads with Allah that, oh Allah, send me back, لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلُ صَالِحًا, so that maybe I would do good deeds, فِيمَا تَرَكْتُ كُلًّا. And that is whatever I had left. Allah says, كَلَّا, no. إِنَّهَا كَلِمَةٌ هُوَ قَائِلُهَا. Allah has made the decision. This is the time of death. That's the end of it. There is no second chance on coming back to the dunya and to do good deeds. And then after saying that, now that the death has come to you, Allah says, وَمِنْ وَرَائِهِمْ بَرْزَخٌ إِلَى يَوْمٍ يُبْعَثُونَ. And following them after death is the barzakh, the intermediary phase, until the day of yawmun yub'asun, the day they will be resurrected and brought back to life. And so even in this ayat we see you have maut and then you have qiyamat, and in between Allah says this is the barzakh. This time is the intermediary time, and until فَإِذَا نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ, when the trumpet would be blown, people will be brought back, and then there will be the process of judgment. فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, whoever's scale would be more heavier with good deeds, they will be the one who will be muflihun, the successful people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically has used, yes, this is Surah Mu'minun, ayat 99 to 104. وَمَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ فِي جَهَنَّمْ خَالِدِينَ. But those whose scale would be lighter, as far as the good deed is concerned, they will be the true losers. They will be in Jahannam forever, and they will have fire on their face. And so this is where we see that even Quran has used the term Barzakh. It's not only from Hadith, but it is from Quran itself. Now, what happens there, and how many groups are there? I just would like to make a preface here that nobody knows for sure. The only thing that we know about after death and Barzakh and the day of Qiyamah is based on the Quran and the sayings of the infallible ones. That's the only way. Our aql does not have the ability, to go into the future and to see what's going to happen. And so that is the basis on which we have all this discussion. We have about, in general, 4 groups in the Barzakh. And their status would be different from one another. First is the group of the true believers, the mu'mineen of the highest rank. And these are the people who are either blameless, they are very good in their life, that they, have very, very few sins, or even if they have committed sins in their life, the sins have been washed away before they die. And the washing or the kafara for their sins happens in 2 ways. One is through worldly suffering. It could be in form of their, health, suffering in health, or in their wealth, poverty. It could be with family members, challenges and loss, or even, some very good parents have very difficult children who bother them, torture them, and people say, what's happening? What did I do? I raised them as a good children. I took care of my own parents. We don't know. Sometimes it ends up as a kafara for the good believers. Or you could have a very nasty neighbor bothering all the time, putting you under stress, or an unjust ruler, or unfair husband or wife. I'm just being polite there to use that term. But all these kinds of relationships in life where we have difficulty, for a mu'min kamil, for a good mu'min, that becomes like a kafara for their sins. Now, it is important to realize this could happen, but nobody, absolutely nobody has a right to say you are suffering in your poverty or because of your illness because you are a sinner. That's not anybody's right or even the ability for anyone to know what's happening. But there is one angle to this worldly suffering that it would be used as a kafara, atonement for the sins of the perfect believers. And if that is not sufficient, then a painful death itself will again become one method by which the sins of a good mu'min or a mu'minah is washed away. So when they reach into a Barzakh, they are in a better situation. So what happens? Allah cannot send anyone to Jannah, because Jannah is after the day of Qiyamah. He knows when it comes to the true and perfect believers, he knows that this person deserves to go into Jannah, but he cannot break his own rules and the laws that he has made. So Jannah is only after the day of Qiyamah. But what happens then? They will be questioned in the grave, the true believers. And once they go through since they are true believers, their answers would be correct. And so then they will go into the state of bliss. Using the terms used by Allama Tabatabai, he would say it will be like a preview of Jannat for them. It wouldn't be a Jannat, because Jannat is only after the day of judgment. And so it will be a preview of Jannat for them, and they will be in the state of bliss. Many people, question this. Then how can, we even feel that pleasure if we are in that category? It is more like, since you are not into an actual Jannat by itself, it's more like, people have good dreams. So they are not really there. But in their dream, when they have a good dream, they like it. And in their mind, they are very peaceful. So it's a similar kind of situation. This is just an analogy to understand the bliss in the grave in the state of Barzakh. So this is the first group, the true believers. The opposite of this now would be the confirmed unbelievers and the munafiqeen. The completely opposite of the first one. And these are the munafiqeen or the unbelievers who knew the truth but still stubbornly refused to accept it. And what happens to them? Either their life is devoid of any good deeds, so they're Jahannami anyway, or maybe they might have done good deeds in this dunya. They are kafir kamil, of a higher level. And what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would, out of His grace, He doesn't have to do this. Because whatever the good deeds that they did, it was not fi sabilillah or qurbatan ilallah. So Allah really doesn't have any obligations towards them. But out of His grace, He will still compensate them for their good deeds in this dunya. Worldly blessing, completely opposite of the mu'min kamil. Health, wealth, position, power, family members, good neighbors, or just ruler, good spouse. Many people complain, Muslims, they say, look at the Western world, it's so peaceful, so stable, democracy and justice and law and order, and what is happening to us? Well, maybe this is the situation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would like to compensate them for whatever good they do in this dunya. Or it could also be by a peaceful death. This would be the end of their compensation that Allah would give to them in this dunya. But what will happen after they die in Barzakh? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that they deserve Jahannam, hellfire. But they cannot be sent into Jahannam because Jahannam and Jannat is something where people will go after the day of judgment. And so they will be questioned. Just like a mu'min kamil, there will be also, sawal and jawab and questioning in the grave for this group also. And after that, they will enter into a state of torment. Opposite of the mu'min kamil in Barzakh. So this will be a preview of Jahannam for the confirmed kuffar and munafiqeen. Now, before even I go to the third group, let me emphasize that what we had said about the first and the second group, these are just general statements. It doesn't mean you would not see exceptions to what has been mentioned. These are just based on the hadith that we have from our ma'asumeen especially, and so you would always see sometimes exception to what we have seen here. The third group, this is probably the biggest. So you have two extremes, true mu'mineen, or the mu'min who are more perfect, and then you have those who are kafir and munafiq who are perfect, and in between you have that bigger group there. And these consist of different kinds. Number one, for example, non-Muslim children, or those who are mentally retarded, or those who didn't have the ability to know what is right and wrong, either because of the ignorance, could be any reason. The third is the group who were unaware of Islam. They never heard about it. For example, if you think about, some of the native tribes in northern parts of Canada, let's say 50 years ago, 100 years ago, there was no possibility for them to ever hear the name Islam or Muhammad or Quran or Allah or anything like that. So they never got the message. They were never aware of Islam at all. Number four, those people who did not believe in Islam, they did not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they were not actively enemies and opposing Islam. Number five, many people who just blindly follow the religion of their forefathers without really rationally and logically thinking about those issues. They don't really care. They didn't really reflect on these issues at all. And number six, those non-Muslims who in a way they heard about the Prophet or the Imams, and they love the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, but they do not believe in them as the divinely appointed leaders. And so that's where the question comes up. People like, for example, Khalil Gibran Khalil, according to the quotation that I have seen in one of the books of Sayyid Murtaza Mutahiri, he says, when he studied the biography of Ali, he made a statement. He says, I have a big complaint with God, that if he really wanted to create a person like Ali bin Abi Talib, why didn't he send him in the 20th century where we need a person like him? Why did he send him at a time when people did not even appreciate him? And so you have a non-Muslim has a kind of an appreciation for Ali. Or those, for example, who look at the Prophet's life, and place him, let's say, among the number one who had the most impact in the social life of human society. And so this is the biggest of the groups in Barzakh. Now what will happen to them? Number one, they will be not subjected to questioning in the grave. Munkir and Nakir will not come to them. They will even be exempted from fishar qabr. There will be no squeezing in the grave for them. Number two, they will be left in the state of deep slumber and sleep. What that means is that they will be, Allah will decide about them on the day of Qiyamah. Unlike the first two groups, from the soon after death, they will know what is their end. A good mu'min will know he's going to end up in Jannah. A perfect or confirmed kafir would know he's going to go into Jahannam. They will have that preview there. They will be able to feel that. But this second group, they will be left in a sense of suspension. There will be no bliss, no torment for them. They will be in the state of suspension, which itself is, I don't think we would like to choose that state. But that's where what will happen to them, and the judgment will be left on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah. And this is a very important point. Sometimes one of the brothers asked last week, and many I see even in written form, people say, if you really look at this process, that only people who are Muslims will go to Jannah. Among Muslims, only Shias will go to Jannah. Among the Shias, only Isnashari Shias will go to Jannah. Among the Isnashari Shias, only the good ones will go to Jannah. So the population of Jannah will be very, very small. Well, from a selfish point of view, that's good, isn't it? But this question comes up. Now, number one, we have to realize, the issue of, numbers of people in Jahannam or Jannat is not really an issue for us. Allah in Quran, He says, وَقَلِيلٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشُّكُورِ. Those who are really grateful to me are very few. Those who believe in me are also few. And so, that wouldn't be an issue, but I think we have to think about it. It cannot just be, it's not white and black. There is a white and black, and then there is a bigger pool of gray in between. And that is where we have to be careful about it. And because this third group, the judgment is left on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah. He is going to decide what will happen to them. And for that, let me just go through 2 or 3 ayat, so that this is not only based on the ahadith. We have on the ahadith of our imams, quite a few of them, where they talk about the different groups in Barzakh and what will happen to them in Qiyamah. But even ayat of Quran are there. For example, this is in Surah Baqarah. Not Surah Baqarah, this is Surah An-Nisa, ayat 97. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَ ظَالِمِ أَنفُسِهِمْ. That when the Malaika will put certain people who are unjust to themselves, when they will be put to death, and their situation will be known that these are the people who will end up in Jahannam. So the Malaika will ask them, قَالُوا فِيمَا كُنْتُمْ. What were you doing? What was your situation in dunya that this is the destination that you are going to? They will respond, قَالُوا. The second line. The excuse they will give, the justification for their weaknesses will be كُنَّا مُسْتَضَعَفِينَ فِي الْعَرْضِ. They will say, what can we do? We were weak people in our society. This habit of our people blaming, mahol kharab hai, Maulana, this country is not good for, being a good Muslim. You can't blame the country or the society. You have to look at yourself. You are responsible for what you do. And so this whole issue of blaming the whole society, and so this will be the excuse given by them to the malaika. And you know what will be the answer of the malaika? قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجر فيها. They will say, if you had problems in your own town, your own city, in your own country, was not the earth of Allah vast enough for you to migrate to some other place? This is where we see from Islamic point of view, if you cannot maintain your faith and the practice of your faith in your own country, on your own homeland, it becomes a wajib for you to do hijrah and move to some other place where you can practice your faith, and be a Muslim. And so their excuse will not be, acceptable there. فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأَوَاؤُهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Their end of such people will be Jahannam, and it is an evil destination. But the following ayat is very interesting. This issue of them saying, we are mustad'afeen, we are the weak ones, or we have been made weak by the environment and the society and the government and other people around us. Allah is saying this is not acceptable in your situation, but there is a possibility that there will be people in human society who will be truly mustad'af, who are truly weak and oppressed, and there is a room for forgiveness for them. And that's the next ayat. إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضَعْفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ. Except, this statement that their end would be Jahannam and it's an evil destination. Now there is an exception to that. What is the exception? Al-Mustad'afin, the weak ones from the men and the women and the children. لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا, who had no way of getting out of that situation. Even if they wanted to get out of it, they had no way to get out of it, and they did not see the right way. They didn't get the hidayat and guidance. And these kinds of mustad'afin people are what we see in the category of the third group. Another ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the same situation, He says, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا سَيَرَ اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Do your amal, do your good deeds. Allah will see, He is witness to your good deeds, and His messenger is witness to your good deeds. And not only that, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ, and even the mu'mineen are witness of your good deeds. وَسَتُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ. And then you will be taken back to the one who knows what is hidden and what is apparent. فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. And He will let you know what you were doing. This is about the normal group, especially the believers. Then Allah says, وَآخَرُونَ مُرْجَوْنَ لِأَمْرِ اللَّهِ. But there will be another group, referring to the mustad'afin, who will be left to the decision of Allah. إِمَّا يُعَذِّبُهُمْ, either He will punish them, وَإِمَّا يَتُوبُ عَلَيْهِمْ, or He will forgive them. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. So there is a second, the middle group, for whom our response would be that we don't know. Marjuna ila amrillah, will leave their issues to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will decide, look at their situation, and either forgive them or punish them. And so that's the middle and the second group between the first and the second extremes. Then there is a fourth group. Now we talked about the first one. The first one is those mu'mineen who are good and practicing, and they try their best. They are not ma'soom, but they are very good. And even if they have sins, the sins will be washed away by worldly suffering or by the agony of death. But what about the mu'mineen who don't fit that first category? And that's where we come to number 4. The believers whose sins could not be washed away by worldly suffering or the agony of death. What will happen to them? There are two situations there. Either Allah will punish them in the grave, so that on the day of Qiyamah they will come out as pure. So they don't have to face any azab in the Akhirah. Or Allah will leave them in the state of suspense, just like the third group. So, the mu'mineen who have the sins which could not be washed before their death, there's two possibilities there. And it is the second one that we are talking about, Barzakh. When the Imam says, you prepare yourself for that time, on the day of Qiyamah we will help you, but, in Barzakh, and this is where we have to realize that this is where we are talking about the believers who have this Iman, but they have weakness in their, amali life. And so this is something we have to keep in mind at all the times. Let me now, go to a couple of more things on this issue. You can, if you want to use the terminology from the Hadith, the first group is al-mu'minun. The second group is al-kafirun. And then the third group is of mustada'afin. Now in Iran, the term mustada'afin has a political meaning also. That's a different thing. That's a politically suppressed people compared to superpower, bothering weaker nations. But from the theological point of view and the Quranic terminology of mustada'afin are those who religiously are weak. The environment was not there for them to learn about Islam or know Islam or live by Islam. And the fourth group would be known as fusaqul mu'mineen. Means they are mu'min, but they are fasiq. Means they are sinners. And their situation, it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we see, when we look at the situation of Barzakh, and we are told that, mu'mineen have to prepare themselves. This is where we see one of these statements of Amir al-Mu'mineen in his advice to his son, where he says, وَالْقَبْرُ رَوْزَةٌ مِّن رِيَاضِ الْجَنَّةِ أَوْ حُفْرَةٌ مِّنْ حُفَرِ النَّارِ. The grave will either become a small garden from the gardens of paradise, or it will become a fire pit from the fire of Jahannam. Looking at the hadith, let me just go through some of the deeds which will improve our situation in Barzakh or make it more difficult. Let us start with the negative one first. 4 things. Number 1, taking namaz lightly. Istighfar. It's not an issue of not praying. That's a bigger thing. But taking namaz lightly, an example which is given is, somebody who doesn't even care. He stands up for namaz but doesn't even do the wuzu. It's difficult to imagine somebody would go to the trouble of doing namaz. But if that is the situation, that person doesn't even, consider this to be a true communication between him and Allah, this is what could happen if they become, addicted to it or habitually doing things without really paying attention to it. Number 2, we are told 1/3 of the azab in grave will be because of ghibat, backbiting. Number 3, there is a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen where he says, one of the reasons for the azab and punishment in Barzakh would be creating fitna, taking, information from one person, conveying to someone else, in a way that is going to create, friction between the two individuals. And number 4, a husband who does not fulfill the rights of the wife. That's one of the bases of azab in the grave. There is an interesting story of Sa'ad bin Mu'az, a very famous companion of Rasulullah. He died during the lifetime of the Prophet. And when the Prophet was told about his death, he actually got up without even putting on his abba and his shoes or slippers, went to his house, himself personally was part of the ghusl which was given and kafan to this individual, and he was there even in the burial of this person. And according to him, I saw even the malaika joining in this funeral. But then after the funeral was done, the mother of Sa'ad bin Mu'az was alive. And when she saw that the Prophet is participating in the ghusl and kafan and funeral and burial of his son Sa'ad bin Mu'az, she became very happy, which is a very natural thing for her to do. And she made a statement that I'm sure my son is in Jannah. This is where I think we have to be careful about making statements about individuals. We have criteria are known, we know these are the basis for it, but to make a judgment about individual, that's not for us to make that judgment. And immediately Rasulullah says, you don't know. You don't know. You don't know that after burial he is going into difficulty because he was not, he didn't have a good way of behaving with his wife. And so this issue of, one of the issues of the basis of azab, of Barzakh is the issue of, husband and wife relationship. On a positive side, what are the things which will help an individual? Number 1, of course, the status of shahadat. If a person becomes shaheed in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shahadat itself is a sufficient, test and trial. That person doesn't have to go through anything now. Number 2, of course, you can extend that concept of shahadat. There are so many ahadiths narrated by Shias and Sunni muhaddiseen and mufassirin, where they say that the Prophet says, for example, ala man mata ala hubbi Muhammadin mata shahida, that verily whoever dies with the love of Ali Muhammad, he is also a shaheed. So this hadith can be, this statement can be expanded there, that it is also include those who will die with the love of Ali Muhammad. Number 2, a person who helps a fellow human being in strengthening his iman or her iman. So whatever you do in teaching somebody else to become a better mu'min or a mu'minah, by teaching or guiding or counseling, that itself becomes a basis for, more sawab in the state of Barzakh. Number 3, which is not in our control, although I'm told there are some people who can actually even control that for their own death. If a person dies in the eve of Friday, Shab Jummah, or the day of Friday, the timing of the death itself, the blessing of Shab Jummah and Jummah, will increase the bliss of Barzakh for the individual. Number 4, man atamma ruku'ahu lam yadkhulu ma yadkhuluhu wahshatul qabr. Somebody who fulfills the ruku in the perfect way. It's not a ruku where they just get up and then, get up quickly. If somebody is calm, relaxed, and does the complete ruku properly, that state of going into ruku pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is going to help the individual in Barzakh. Number 5, the love for the Ahlul Bayt itself. there is a famous hadith of the Prophet where he says, Hubbi Ali Muhammad, the love for Ahlul Bayt, helps us in 7 situations after death, at the time of death, at the time of the questioning in the grave, and different situations. And one of them is the state of Barzakh. Number 6, saying the salawat on Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. The more you do that, the chances increases that you will get the nur in your grave, the light in your grave. Number 7, there are 3 kinds of women who will be protected from azab in Barzakh. Number 1, a wife who patiently bears poverty of her husband, does not nag or complain about it. That itself would help her in increasing her blessings in Barzakh. Number 2, a wife who patiently bears the bad akhlaq husband, the husband who is not always, behaving in the right way. And number 3, the wife who forgives her mahar to the husband also, her bliss will increase in the grave in Barzakh. And number 8, of course, is the ziyarat of Imam Hussein in Karbala. That is also one of the bases of, having a such better situation in the state of Barzakh. Let me now just, conclude with 2 examples of the ahadith that we have talked about. Remember, the whole theme of the hadith we discussed last week was the issue is that you cannot take one hadith and look at it in isolation. Just as we looked at the issue of, Iman doesn't harm the doer, whatever he does. Well, there is a condition there. Or for example, Hubbi Ali, doesn't harm what a person does. They're all conditions attached to that. It is very much like, the famous statement of Rasulullah, quoted almost by all biographers of the Prophet, that during the early days in Mecca, the Prophet used to go around and he would call the people to Islam by saying, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ تُفْلِحُ, which means, say La ilaha illallah and you will get salvation in the hereafter. Now, if you just look at that statement in isolation, what does it mean? If a person just says La ilaha illallah, that's it? No Muslim ever takes that hadith of Rasulullah, in that sense. No, you have to also believe in Rasulullah himself. You have to believe in the Quran that he brought. You have to fulfill the duties which have come with the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. So when we look at these statements, it doesn't mean you just look at that one statement and says, okay, you do this, you get Jannah. So you forget about everything else. No, it doesn't work that way. It's just like, I use this example. There is a English saying where it says, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. What does it mean? Just eat one apple every day and that's the end of your life? You will be healthy, no problem? No, it's just a way of saying that let your diet be more balanced. You should have everything including fruits, part of it. So when you look at a hadith of that kind, you have to think about it. Let me end with the hadith that we have from Imam Ali ibn Musa Raza alayhi salatu wassalam, to connect that with the hadith of Rasulullah where he says, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ تُفْلِحُ. Now that doesn't mean only saying La ilaha illallah is sufficient. You don't have to say Muhammadun Rasulullah, you don't believe in the Quran or follow the teachings. The Imam in Nishapur, in his journey from Medina to Merv, when he stopped there and he was asked for a hadith, he says, I heard from my father, who has heard from his father, going all the way to Rasulullah, from him to Jibreel, from Jibreel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kalimatu la ilaha illallah hisni. This creed or this kalima of La ilaha illallah is my castle. فَمَنْ دَخِلَ حِسْنِي أَمِنَ مِنْ عَوَابِي. Whoever enters into this castle of La ilaha illallah will be protected from my awab. Now, this is a true statement, of course. But what does it mean? You don't have to then believe in Muhammadan Rasulullah? No, that's where Imam then at the end, says, وَلَكِنْ بِشُرُوطِهَا. Remember, this is good. You will be protected from the azab of Allah. وَلَكِنْ بِشُرُوطِهَا, with its conditions. وَأَنَا مِنْ شُرُوطِهَا. And one of the conditions is that you have to also believe in me. And so this issue of condition, keep that in mind all the time. We have many ahadiths where we are told, for example, مَنْ بَكَى وَأَبْكَى وَاتَّبَاكَ عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ وَجَبَتْ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Whoever cries on Imam Hussain, whoever makes someone else cry on Imam Hussain, whoever just makes the face a sad face when they hear about the tragedy of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, وَجَبَتْ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Jannat is wajib on him. What does it mean? Does it mean then, you don't need to think about namaz and roza and the dues of zakat and khums and fitra and, all halal and haram there? No. If you really are a azadar of Imam Hussain, you love Imam Hussain alayhi salam, you understand why he gave the sacrifice. The sacrifice was to preserve Islam. And you have to preserve Islam in your life, in your action. And so all these kinds of ahadith, we have to think about it. And we cannot take it in isolation. We have to look at the broader picture of what has been said in other ahadith. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to understand what is right and what is haqq, and be among the true followers of the Islam brought by Prophet Muhammad and preserved by his Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. Inshallah, we'll be sending the handouts by the email, especially the list I couldn't even show to you on the PowerPoint of the things which will help us in the state of Barzakh. Inshallah, that will be included in the handouts.